Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of December the 7th and December the 8th, 2024. So, how do I greet you on December the 7th? Am I supposed to say Happy Pearl Harbor Day? Doesn't quite sound right, but still, December the 7th. Saturday is the 83rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and this is an event I want to consider because right now, this weekend in 2024, there are certain parallels between now and then, and it's not just the fact that it's December the 7th, it's also the fact that we have an opposition aspect between the Sun and Jupiter, and there are other things going on this weekend. You know, we've just had Mercury going sort of combust, sort of on Thursday. We had the Sun and Mercury being conjunct. Then on Friday, we've had Mars going stationary retrograde. Then this weekend, we've got Sun opposition Jupiter, and Sun was opposition Jupiter at the time of Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941. And also we've got Neptune going stationary direct. Neptune, the planet of the sea. So there is this sort of Pearl Harbor feel about today. And that's something I want to be discussing. You know, what is happening? Does it relate to America? Does it relate to certain sort of individuals, perhaps involved in the running of America? And so there are certainly things to consider, and you know, astrologically, this weekend is certainly very packed. Now, does that mean that anything dramatic is going to happen? Well, you know, not necessarily. It's often the case with astrology that you see this dramatic time coming up, perhaps years in the future, and you get really psyched up about it, and you talk about it, and you worry about it, you get excited about it, and then it actually happens, and nothing happens. So, you know, that is always a possibility. But in this video, I will be considering this weekend and some of the events of the weekend. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. Now, the usual reminder I have to give: if you happen to enjoy this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And final thing I have to say is I'm on the verge of changing my computer, and the computer I'm working with at the moment, the fan is a bit bad, and you know, some of you are being very polite about it, and you're not making any comments about the fan, but you know, I can certainly hear it, and maybe you can as well. So if there is a fan in the background, my apologies, but I am trying to sort the problem out. So let's look at what's happening this weekend. So top right, that is a picture from Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941, you know, when the Japanese attacked the American fleet in Hawaii, and sort of destroyed, I think, half of it, but they kind of missed the aircraft carriers, and so it wasn't a complete success. And as far as what's happening today, so this chart is for the middle of the weekend, sort of midnight on Sunday the 8th, and you can see that the moon is in Pisces, so it's kind of a moon in Pisces weekend. Now, the moon goes into Pisces at 9:49 a.m. London time. So if you're in Europe or Africa, for most of a weekend, from Sunday morning onwards, late morning perhaps, but late morning on, Saturday, sort of from late morning on Saturday onwards, the moon will be in Pisces. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, then you might have to wait until Saturday evening before the moon goes into Pisces. So, the usual things can be said about the moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces, moon is going through a water sign. It has a certain amount of flexibility, particularly emotional flexibility. And, moon in Pisces can move around, can go with the tide. And so it's generally quite a good place for the moon to be in. The moon in Pisces, it's ruled by Jupiter. And all things being equal, it's relatively happy-go-lucky, unless other things are going on. For example, unless it's aspected by Saturn, which of course it is, because the moon in Pisces does make a conjunction to Saturn. And so that is going to have an influence. It's the moon is not going to be quite as happy-go-lucky in Pisces as it usually is. And that might mean that there's a certain capacity to control one's feelings, moon conjunct Saturn, and there may be also a capacity to structure one's feelings and make sure that just things don't get out of control. But moon conjunct Saturn can also be about emotional repression, keeping our feelings back, because we might be afraid of the consequences if we really were to be honest, and if we were to let our true feelings be revealed. We might be a bit uncomfortable about that. And it's not just the moon making a conjunction with Saturn. With Saturn, on Saturday we also get Mercury making a square to Saturn. So Mercury square Saturn is quite disciplined as well. Mercury represents the mind. And so Mercury square Saturn, I suppose in a positive way, could be serious thinking. There are things we need to think about. We're very serious about it. And we might be very focused. Though on the downside, Mercury square Saturn may feel that there are things we can't say because we'll be afraid about other people's reaction, or we just might not feel that the situation is right. Although there's an alternative way of looking at it. Mercury square Saturn can actually be quite harsh, because Mercury is the way we speak. It can be the way we speak, and Saturn can be critical. And so harsh words can be a manifestation of this aspect. Now, we do have a sign change today. Venus moves into Aquarius, and it actually moves into Aquarius at 6:13 a.m. London time. So if you're in Europe, America, Africa, really for the whole weekend, you've got Venus in Aquarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then Venus will move into Aquarius a bit later in the day, maybe sort of early evening, something like that. So there is a bit of a change, Venus moving into Aquarius. We've had it in Capricorn. Now it's in Aquarius. So one thing it doesn't change, of course, is the rulership of Venus, because Venus in Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Venus in Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn, because I'm of the view that it is Saturn that rules Aquarius, not Uranus. And so with Venus in Aquarius, there continues to be a certain aloofness, but I think that Venus in Aquarius is perhaps a little more independent-minded. And also, the moment Venus moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. So Venus-Pluto conjunction, it can be quite intense, it can be quite powerful, and we may demand attention. Alternatively, with Venus conjunct Pluto, it may be about emotional manipulation. Although I don't want to take things too far, because Venus is in Aquarius. That is an air sign, and it does have a certain detachment. But still, it may be that with our words and with our ideas, we can in some way control people, or certainly have some kind of influence. Now there are couple of other things, two other major events happening over the weekend. On Saturday, we have Sun opposition Jupiter, And there's the Sun 16 Sagittarius and Jupiter at 1613 Gemini. Now, I do not regard the Sun-Jupiter opposition as necessarily being a fortunate aspect. I know it might sound good, Jupiter, planet of good fortune, opposition with Sun, Sun-Jupiter, being expansive, being optimistic, being enthusiastic. But Jupiter is very often a planet which releases things which have been building up. And Sun opposition Jupiter, it just reaches a certain point where it's almost like something has to explode. Something just has to give with Sun opposition Jupiter. Additionally, we have got Neptune coming to a standstill. So Neptune has been moving retrograde, and now it's done. Comes to a standstill, starts to move direct. And of course, it moves into Aries in the end. I think in the spring of next year, there'll be Neptune in Aries. And so, Neptune is stationary direct, quite close to the fixed star Skeet. And so from now on, Neptune will be getting closer and closer to Skeet. And this is a fixed star often connected with shipping disasters and disasters in general. And things don't prosper under the influence of Skeet. I mean, also with Neptune stationary direct, it just may be that fantasies and illusions start to move. And perhaps we're very aware of our fantasies, or maybe we're very aware of other people's fantasies. And that might create a certain amount of confusion. But in general, in the world, it is about Neptunian stuff. What is Neptune? Neptune can be about alcohol, it can be about drugs, it can be about oil, it can be about chemicals. And it can be about one person misleading another person with Neptune going stationary direct. And I will be considering a few people, famous people, who are being influenced potentially by Neptune going direct. Now, moving on to Sunday, and Sunday is not quite such an action-packed day. I mean, the moon continues moving through Pisces. It makes a square to Mercury, and then it moves on to make the conjunction to Saturn, and then it makes a square to the Sun. So the moon square Sun on Sunday is a first quarter moon. It's when the moon is 90 degrees from the Sun. If there haven't been any clouds around you, you perhaps will have noticed that the moon is getting bigger. There's a rather beautiful moon. I certainly saw that yesterday, this sort of thin crescent conjunct Venus. It was a very nice moon. I think maybe you can still see it. And that sort of binds us all. We can still, all of us, wherever we live on this planet, we can all see the same moon. And first quarter moon, it represents, if you like, the first crisis of this new lunar cycle that started on December the 1st, so new moon December the 1st. And so we've got a first quarter moon. So we see the first challenge of this new cycle, and we have to sort of work out how we're going to deal with this challenge. It needn't be a problem. I mean, it shouldn't be a problem. But we can, for the first time, start to see the way things are developing. There's also a sesquiquadrate between Venus and Jupiter. Now, I would be inclined to see that sesquiquadrate between Venus and Jupiter as being kind of related to the Sun-Jupiter opposition, because Venus is semi-square the Sun, and it's sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So in a way, the Sun, Jupiter and Venus are all together, and perhaps it makes that Sun-Jupiter opposition just that much more powerful. Now, turning to the chart for Australia, so for Sydney to be specific, just to remind everyone that I do my forecast of the 12 signs for everyone around the world, but at the begin that halfway phase in the weekend, midnight on Sunday, so in New York, the moon is at 11 Pisces, sort of very much kind of in the middle of Pisces. But if one set that chart for that chart for Sydney, it would be slightly different. We would have the moon at noon would be at that's December the 1st. Let me just switch that. Sorry about that. Let me just change that to December the 1st. Just remember to December the 8th. That's better. There, you can see that the moon is at 1 degrees Pisces. So if you're in Australia and New Zealand, then really you can regard the whole of Saturday as being the moon in Aquarius, and the whole of Sunday as being the moon in Pisces. So that's a sort of nice, neat demarcation of Saturday and Sunday for you. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, where I put the sun at the center of the solar system, and if we make that change, make it heliocentric, there we have it, and you can see that there is an Earth-Jupiter conjunction. Now, I've been talking about this Earth-Jupiter conjunction every day pretty much for the last week. And so a Sun opposition Jupiter is by definition a conjunction between the Earth and Jupiter. So when we see that Earth-Jupiter conjunction, we're just seeing what we've already noticed in the geocentric chart, but it's just seen in a slightly different way. And this Earth-Jupiter conjunction, I believe, is important, and at the end of the video I will be telling you why I think it's important. I think it can be a time where things do get released, and I think it's made all the more powerful by its connection with Pluto. So look, Pluto is up here at 1 degree 31 Aquarius. So that means that Pluto is sesquiquadrate Jupiter, heliocentrically this is, and it is sesquiquadrate the Earth. So really the involvement of Pluto makes that Earth-Jupiter conjunction all the more powerful. It may really be that something is going to give this weekend. Something has been building up. We may have been conscious of it, we may have not been conscious of it, but suddenly it happens and we start to understand it. And it may be a case of reality hitting home. So that, I think, is the main thing going on heliocentrically. I mean, you could say, oh, well, we can see that anyway with the Earth-Jupiter conjunction, with Earth-Jupiter, Sun-Jupiter opposition geocentrically. But I kind of like the symbol of Earth-Jupiter. We are on the planet Earth. We're conjunct Jupiter, and so something's got to give. Something has to be released. So now I think I'm just going to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for this weekend. It's the weekend of December the 7th and the 8th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you may feel that it's a time when you've done whatever you want to do. You've done your best, but you can only do so much. And as the weekend progresses, you just may feel that you want to do less and less. And you may be wondering, what is the point? Do you really need to do any more? And that approach might be best. And one reason for this is, Aries, that you do have your concerns, and that things are a little complicated, and you might be worrying about what might go wrong. And so if you're worried about what might go wrong, why take the risk? And that is perhaps quite a responsible approach for an Aries. Aries does have a certain reputation for being a risk taker and sort of doing things where you assume that things are going to be okay, but that's not something that you can really guarantee. But right now, you're perhaps being a little more careful, and I do think that is almost certainly a good thing. I mean, you can't take risks. You shouldn't take risks, and if you do something which is a bit unusual, you sort of go off the beaten track, do something that you've never done before, even then there's something bothering you. You're kind of thinking about what might go wrong, and sure, things might go wrong. And so Aries, it just might be best if you don't necessarily have to do it. Is it necessary to tempt fate? And I think that in most cases it probably is not a good idea to tempt fate. And there are many ways of tempting fate. One can take a physical risk, or one can take an intellectual risk. An intellectual risk, Aries, would perhaps be deciding to argue about something that you don't actually know very much about. That could happen. And if you get yourself into that situation, you may find that you quickly move out of your depth and you don't completely understand what you're talking about. And that does make you vulnerable. I mean, it does make you vulnerable perhaps to being embarrassed, sort of realizing you don't know what you're talking about. So if you don't feel you've got the knowledge, then don't say anything. And perhaps you can learn from what other people are saying, or maybe you can watch what people are doing, and then you can draw your own conclusions. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Venus is the ruler of your opposite sign, Libra, and it is changing sign. And it's changing sign and it's moving towards a conjunction of Pluto. So Venus has been in Capricorn, it's now moving into Aquarius. And so with that sign change, you might notice that some of the people close to you are perhaps becoming a little bit more independent. And with that Venus conjunct Pluto, they may want to safeguard their independence. And they might, in their own way, be quite intense and, want to do things their way as well. I think it's best, Aries, that you just accept that situation. You maybe, at the moment, don't have quite as much power as you usually have. And so if you're in that kind of situation, maybe you should give people a certain amount of leeway, particularly if they're close to you. You don't have to be in control all the time. And if someone is feeling that they really have to do something, then you probably shouldn't stand in their way. Taurus. So Taurus, Venus is changing sign, as I was just saying to Aries. And for you, that is an important event. And the reason it's an important event is because Venus is your ruler. And so if Venus changes sign, then you undergo a change. And so that change from Venus moving from Venus in Capricorn to Venus in Aquarius might make you a little less concerned about just doing the right thing for the sake of it, and instead having a greater capacity for independent thinking and perhaps independent action as well. And Venus, when it moves into Aquarius, it also makes a conjunction to Pluto. So Venus conjunct Pluto gives us the idea perhaps of you maybe taking yourself quite seriously. I know that it's a weekend, but there are things going on over the weekend, and you may be very aware of your various responsibilities. And that would especially be the case if you had a job or you have a business and there's work to do over the weekend. Even if there's not work to do over the weekend, you might feel there's something you need to do. And that Venus conjunct Pluto is very much going to be about what you need to do and you feeling perhaps there is something you have to do. Venus moving into Aquarius can also be about being quite self-conscious, being aware of what you look like, how you occur to other people. And you might be exaggerating to an extent. You might be making too many assumptions about how people respond to you. You might think that what you wear is of critical importance, what you look like really matters. Other people might not be so concerned, but the point is that you are concerned. And this Venus moving into Aquarius, it is the kind of configuration which is, it is about looking in the mirror and looking in a mirror and kind of having a question: do you look right? Is this the right image? And I know it sounds very superficial, but your own concerns are real. And so it might be a time, Taurus, where you do want to make a special effort to look your best. And it will be nice to be more specific. I suppose Venus is conjunct Pluto, and I think if you can give the impression of being someone who is quite intense, who is in control, who knows what they're doing, has power, and if this can in some way be reflected by the way you dress, the way you present yourself, I think that would be a good thing. Now, aside from that, the moon is moving through Pisces. It is starting to make a conjunction to Saturn, and that moon conjunct Saturn may say something about your social activities over the weekend. So moon conjunct Saturn might indicate a person who takes their social life and their social responsibilities seriously. But it might also suggest that if you do try to socialize, if you go to parties or other gatherings over the weekend, there may just be a certain sense that it's not entirely satisfactory, that you're perhaps having to try a little bit too hard and you may feel somewhat out of place. I don't think you're really out of place. I think we're talking about your perceptions, but still you do feel that this isn't necessarily where you want to be, and you'd perhaps rather be somewhere else. And at the same time, when you're with other people, you just may feel that you can't fully express yourself, at least in a sort of a relaxing way. If you want to be heard, then as far as you're concerned, you have to do something slightly dramatic. And it just may be that Taurians may find themselves in a position where at some level they have to exaggerate or perhaps have to play with the truth. Do something, say something which is dramatic, which gets people's attention. And I suppose under normal circumstances that's not a particularly advisable strategy. I mean, you don't want to get attention just for the sake of it. But maybe today that's okay, or at least over the weekend it's okay. You get people's attention, you do something that's a little bit dramatic, not too dramatic, but dramatic enough to catch everyone's attention. And once you've got everyone's attention, once the audience is looking at you, then perhaps you have a certain amount of control and you can start to make things happen your way. So that's a broad picture today. So over the weekend, Taurus, I think that possibly the main event is Venus moving into Aquarius and the fact that Venus is conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. So whatever else is going on, that Venus moving into Aquarius does make you very focused, especially as it's conjunct Pluto. And if there's something you want, I think you're going to want to put everything you've got into getting it. And I actually think that your chances of success are actually, I think they're actually very high. Gemini. Gemini, in a way, you have a certain sense of responsibility, both to yourself and to other people. You realize that there are some things that you're just supposed to be doing, and you perhaps recognize that no one else is going to do it. It's down to you. And especially if it's a weekend. I mean, the weekend, some people may not be on good form, they may be slacking off, they feel they don't have to do anything, but not you, Gemini. You're pretty aware of your responsibilities, and if you are in a position of leadership over the course of a weekend, I think you're going to do a good job. I think that you will just have a seriousness that maybe sometimes is not linked with your sign. Gemini is supposed to be a little bit light, not take things too seriously, chop and change. But no, there is a focus and a seriousness this weekend, Gemini, which I think is going to be very real. And at the same time, you have to be aware of what might be holding you back. I think as far as you're concerned, while you are ambitious, I think that you may reach the conclusion, but if you really want to follow your ambitions, if you really want to make progress, you're going to have to do things in a slightly roundabout way. For example, it may be that you feel that to get what you want, you may have to ingratiate yourself with certain people, and that might be very important to you. It's not just about doing the work and expecting a result. It's all about setting the scene. And so you might feel, even though it's a weekend, that you might have to compromise a little bit, just compromise enough so as to get someone's attention. And once you've got their attention, then you may be in a better position to really sort of start to make things happen. So just because it's a weekend, doesn't mean you have to actually do nothing, almost as a sort of a matter of obligation. People are not supposed to do anything practical over the weekend. Well, I think in your case, you should be trying to be practical, because when you really set yourself a set of goals, I think right now there's just a very good chance that you'll be able to accomplish them. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be easy. In fact, it could actually be really difficult. But I'm confident that you've got the willpower and the strength of mind, Gemini, to be able to see things through. Cancer. Cancer, you are aware of what you can do and what you can't do. And I don't think over the weekend you're going to want to be too experimental. I mean, it's always nice to be a little experimental, but if you sort of play games and you maybe try to be someone you're not, that could be hard work. But at the same time, Cancer, you don't want to be narrow-minded. I mean, there are certain things you have to experience and be aware of if you want to be able to, make the most of everything around you. And sometimes dealing with the unknown can be difficult. It can be challenging, and you might feel that you're not going to make progress because you don't understand something. But if you don't understand something, that means there's a gap, and you have to find out if there's a way to fill that gap. And it may be a time when you need to sort of study, or at least read the instructions very carefully, and just making sure that you absolutely understand what's going on. I think that if you can do that and put the effort into it, then I think that in the end, you are going to benefit. Now, on Sunday, we do have the moon conjunct Saturn. We also have the moon square the sun. So that moon square sun is symbolic of the first quarter. I mean, it is the first quarter. So the lunar cycle is now underway. And with that moon square the sun, you get the first sense of what you are supposed to be doing. And I think it might work in the sense of just feeling that you started things being in a position where you had to organize, structure, make sure the basics are all sorted out. That's how it started. But now you're being perhaps presented with new information, and what you thought was straightforward, simple, is not quite as simple as you'd imagined. And for some Cancerians, there may be a certain challenge to break free. You had concentrated on something for a long time, it all seemed to make sense, and you were getting increasingly involved, and then now you're just feeling, hold on, is this right? And so perhaps Cancer, it's a time for questions. Questioning whether you've made the right decision. Also questioning whether you're just in the right scene. Maybe you've made a bad choice. I'm not saying you have made a bad choice, but perhaps you're surrounded by people and situations who at some level you disagree with, and disagree with perhaps on a quite fundamental philosophical level. So perhaps you should consider the possibility that a bit of a change might be a good thing, spending more time with one group of people and less time with another group of people, because people do matter, and you are sensitive to their influence. Leo, you have a certain excitement about you. You've got lots of ideas. You're aware that lots of different things could happen, and perhaps you feel that in some way you yourself can actually make them happen. And it's all about telling people what's on your mind and letting them know maybe how excited you are. People sometimes need some excitement, and if you can show that you are excited about something, then it's possible that other people will get excited as well. But Leo, you don't want to take things too far, because one of the most important aspects of the weekend, perhaps the most important, is an opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. And that Sun and Jupiter does have a certain excitement to it, feeling that you want to take things as far as you can, push them to their limit. And that's nice, but is it something that's really worth your effort? I think there might be some danger that you worry too much about what other people think. And you might have obsessive thoughts. Are you doing the right thing? Maybe you're creating the wrong impression. Maybe you need to make more of an effort to do things which are in keeping with other people's tastes. I mean, you don't want to rock the boat, do you? But Leo, you have an independent mind, and you shouldn't be doing things to please anyone, or perhaps more importantly, you shouldn't be avoiding certain activities because perhaps you think they're unpopular or they're not cool or they're not current or whatever. You need to do what's important to you. And that is a reminder. But the sun is in Sagittarius, and for a Leo, sun in Sagittarius, that should be an open, expansive, happy-go-lucky place for the sun. That it should be about you being able to really tune into your creativity. What you don't want to do is worry too much about the preferences and the likes and dislikes of other people. That would be a shame if you took things too far, and just end up just not feeling comfortable. Not feeling comfortable because you've spent too long compromising. And even if you compromise, even if you spend ages trying to do things that other people like, are they going to appreciate it? Probably not. So in fact, if you're looking for harmony, Leo, then I think the best way of finding it is probably just to do things in your own way. Do things because you like them. And also, Leo, I think it's just going to be very important over the weekend, but you have self-respect. That matters. And you kind of know which situations are undermining you, which situations are preventing you from getting respect you deserve. And if you're aware of those situations, you should logically be able to avoid them and instead, respect your own space and respect your privacy. So that's something you can do. But certain Leos maybe just tempted to worry too much about other people, thinking that other people in some way are so important that you should be compromising your identity. That's absolutely not something you want to do. Though I suppose I can't help but notice that Venus is moving into Aquarius. Now, Venus moving into Aquarius is relevant to you because, obviously Aquarius is your opposite sign. And so with Venus moving into Aquarius, that might suggest a few changes in terms of relationships. It may be someone new entering the scene, someone you might have never seen before, or maybe you haven't seen them for a long time. But Venus in Aquarius is there, and Venus is making a conjunction to Pluto. And the Venus-Pluto conjunction might indicate someone who does have to be taken very seriously, someone who is quite intense. Venus conjunct Pluto might also say something about your work, if that's relevant, or your ambitions. And that Venus-Pluto may indicate a person or perhaps a situation who is powerful and serious and does need to be taken seriously. I mean, really, you have to take this thing seriously. This is not a joke. But if you can adopt a serious approach, Leo, then I think you'll find a way of dealing with the issue. And maybe what we're talking about is the fact that some of your ambitions for the future are reliant on other people. And so the way you handle other people with this Venus conjunct Pluto is going to be important. You do need to have a certain amount of caution, but at the same time, you don't want to be afraid, so concerned about how someone might respond to you that you don't do anything. Well, that would just be a shame. So give people respect, but don't give people too much respect. Virgo, the moon is in Pisces, and it's making a conjunction to Saturn. And of course, Pisces is your opposite sign. So when you've got a moon conjunct Saturn in Pisces, this may indicate that other people are important, and they may be having a certain influence on you. And then there's a question of, is this a good influence? Well, Mercury is making a square to Saturn, and that square between Mercury and Saturn over the weekend could be a problem. It may be that you just feel that your horizons are being limited by another person. They're just preventing you from just expressing yourself in the way you'd like, and they might also be quite undermining. I mean, you do have an idea, Virgo, about what security means and what makes you feel comfortable. And it's possible with Mercury square Saturn that you find that someone is in a way is undermining you if you let them. And I don't think you have to let them. I mean, you might feel that you want to be obliging. I mean, it's always a good idea to be polite, but you don't want to be too obliging. And if you give too much away, and if you give people too much control over you, then you're going to have to pay the price. And so I would have said, Virgo, that it's a weekend where you really must try to be as independent as possible. If you give people a chance, they will take over. They'll tell you what to do. They'll be judgmental. But maybe this is a situation, Virgo, where you should not give people a chance. Instead, you need to be quite critical and always ask, what is the motive? Why is another person doing what they're doing? And is it possible that they're playing power games? You know, some people might be playing games with power, and that's kind of not a game you really want to play. And if people are messing you around, playing power games, then yeah, it's probably best, Virgo, that you just stay out of their way. So I think, Virgo, a bit of independent mindedness is going to be important. Now, another thing that may be bothering you, Virgo, is how much do you actually interact, and how much do you how much you actually contribute? Because there is a certain amount of pressure to contribute to. I mean, I'm not talking about contributing money or anything. I'm talking about contributing you, contributing your time, contributing your personality, because it's in another person's interest, perhaps, or perhaps there's an obligation on you. Well, I think, Virgo, it is a time to put yourself first. Yes, there may be pressure not to be selfish, to always consider other people, to do what people want, don't make them unhappy. But I think, Virgo, it's a situation where you don't really want to tie yourself up in knots. You don't want to feel guilty. You don't want to feel that you're morally obliged to do anything, Virgo. So it might be best if you listen to yourself and make up your own mind and do what is right for you. Don't do what is right for anyone else. That's not, I think, how you should behave. But don't ignore other people. Don't think they don't matter, or don't think that they don't have any influence. They do have an influence, and people can have an impact on you. But you just have to get the thing in perspective. You should certainly make an effort to understand people, understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, but that doesn't mean to say that you have to do everything their way. You don't. And Virgo, I would have said that your independence really does matter. Libra, we have got a sign change involving Venus. Venus is moving out of Capricorn and it is moving into Aquarius. And that means that Venus is moving into an air sign, and Libra is an air sign. And so with Venus, your ruler, moving into Aquarius, I do think that you're going to feel better. And you're perhaps going to feel a bit braver as well. I think Libra, over the last few weeks, you may at times have been a little cautious. You didn't want to go too fast because you were perhaps afraid of the consequences. You didn't know what would happen. And you perhaps thought, Libra, that it was best to do things properly and also to stick to what you knew and trusted. Well, that approach may have served its purpose, but things are changing. And I think that with Venus moving into Aquarius, you can afford to be a little bit more adventurous. And adventure perhaps means, finding new ways perhaps to enjoy yourself and perhaps to do it your way. Venus is not just making a conjunction to Pluto, but Venus is actually moving towards a trine with the North Node, and the North Node is in Aries. So you could say that Venus sextile the North Node is over the next couple of days. You need to do things your way, but in such a manner where you have a complete understanding of other people's impact. So it's not about doing things your way and ignoring other people. It's about doing things your way, but being aware of how other people might have an impact on you. What you mustn't do is just be chaotic about it. You just think that you do what you want. Maybe other people will get in your way. Other people they won't. Maybe they won't get in your way. But who cares? You'll just muddle through. That's not the right approach. If there is going to be an issue of freedom freedom versus restraint, you need to be aware of it right from the beginning. And I think you can be. And with Venus moving into Aquarius, you're going to, I think, in most cases, be fairly independent-minded. And you understand how your independence can be undermined. And at the same time, you know what you have to do to ensure that you are fully respected. And I think you can gain respect today. And one way of gaining respect is perhaps to understand how you can be disrespected. Yeah, you can be disrespected, but if you know you can be disrespected, then you have a way of avoiding it. And I think the most important thing, Libra, is to be very, very clear that your way is the right way, especially in terms of creative self-expression, because creative self-expression cannot be compromised, especially when Venus is conjunct Pluto. Scorpio, we have the moon moving into Pisces. So this weekend, by and large, the moon is in Pisces. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon might not move into Pisces until late on Saturday, but by and large, I think we can regard it as being a moon in Pisces weekend. And being a Scorpio, I think that you appreciate that. This moon in Pisces allows you to respond. It also allows you to, by and large, be yourself and to understand what you should be doing, what you can be doing. You are put on this earth for a purpose, for a definite purpose. You're not put on this earth to do something that you were not designed for, or rather, you're not put on this earth to do something which is outside your purpose. I mean, that is obvious, isn't it? But there may be a little bit of a temptation to do something which is just not relevant, is not you, and it's a waste of time, particularly as someone else could be doing it. On the other hand, if you just concentrate on what you do well, what you're on this planet for, then you'll know you've got it right, because things will just start flowing, and you're going to be able to create your own structure. And we've got Moon conjunct Saturn. Now, that Moon conjunct Saturn might sound like a problem aspect because it's Saturn, but I wouldn't see it a problem. I would see it as you having a strong sense of creative self-discipline. You know what's important to you. You know what matters to you. And because of that, you can really give it everything you've got. And you mustn't be afraid. And there is some possibility of fear, Scorpio. You might feel, that you're not good enough. Or that if you were to be an individual, you might get negative response. I suppose that's possible. But is that really anything to be afraid of? I think that if you are authentic and sincere to yourself and to what you do well, then in a way, what can hold you back? I don't think there's anything that can hold you back. Though, in many cases, Scorpios will be thinking about the past, because Mercury has just gone retrograde. And sorry, not Mercury, Mars. Well, Mercury is retrograde, but what I wanted to say in particular is that Mars has gone retrograde. And, because Mars has gone retrograde, you're thinking about the future. You're very aware of what you need to do, what you can do. But Mars going retrograde is possibly a reminder that in spite of how clever you are, you could always be even cleverer. And it just may occur to you that there was something you were involved in over the last month or two that you didn't really pursue properly. And you maybe thought it was a waste of time, or you didn't think it was relevant. But now you want to look over it again. And this may be about the acquisition of a skill. And you started to learn about this skill, but you stopped learning for one reason or another. You started to focus on something else. But perhaps you need to go back to where you stopped. So where did you stop? Were you in a situation where you didn't have the motivation to see something through? Well, now with Mars going retrograde, it's a time to sort of go back and to have another look. And don't think it's too late. Just because you haven't looked at something for a couple of months doesn't mean you can't look at it again. You've got a good memory. So I think in many ways you're going to be able to remember where you stopped and carry on from there. So, don't give up on things. And, it might take a bit of time to get back in the swing of things, but I think you will, or rather you can, if you make a bit of effort. Now, finishing up with relationships, and there is a conjunction between Venus and Pluto, and with this conjunction between Venus and Pluto, it may be that the people you want to spend time with are quite set in their ways. They want things done in a particular manner, and they're probably not going to listen to you. I mean, if you tell them they should be doing something else or they've got it wrong, I don't think they'll appreciate that. And so if you are spending time with particular people, do understand that they may be more stubborn than usual. and they may want to do things in a particular way, and they'll listen. They'll listen to what you've got to say, but their view might be, well, having listened to all views, I'm right anyway. I'm not going to change my mind. So I would have said, Scorpio, that, don't think that you can change people's minds. I know that some Scorpios like to feel that they have some special power, that they can get people to do things their way, that perhaps they can be manipulative. But in this situation, Venus is moving towards an opposition of Mars. And this opposition between Mars and Venus is going to be exact in 5 days, less than a week. And already I think you're starting to feel it. As Venus moves towards that opposition of Mars, it becomes clear that you and someone else aren't necessarily in agreement, that you have different ways of doing things, and someone else's detachment and sort of rather non-committal approach may actually be quite annoying for you. You have pride and you want things to be taken seriously, and when you see that other people are just being a little too objective, that might really annoy you. And the annoyance could be particularly the case if you're involved in some kind of joint venture, or perhaps if you're working or involved in business, when you feel that there's something really important that needs to be done and it's very serious, and you just don't feel you're getting enough commitment from another person. So what do? Well, you perhaps need to ask yourself whether you've realistically assessed the situation. Maybe you've jumped to conclusions, but it is possible that you in the end realize that some people just don't have your commitment. And if they don't have your commitment, can you trust them? It's not that they're necessarily being dishonest or anything, but are they going to be around in a crisis if they don't have commitment? Are they going to be supportive all the time? So that's perhaps, Scorpio, a question you should be asking yourself. And in general, in terms of relationships over the next week, then it may occur to you that you and someone close to you, or someone who is about to be close to you, have different priorities and perhaps different ways of working, and also different views of the world. And those do have to be negotiated. I think they can be negotiated, but it is difficult when you've got two people with two very different opinions. Sagittarius, probably the main aspect today is an opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. This Sun-Jupiter opposition has been building up for some time, and now it's exact. So Sun opposition Jupiter might be a difference of opinion. That is one possibility, and also a difference of approach. And it may be that, unusually for a Sagittarian, you do feel that things have to be thought through. You don't want to just do the first thing that comes to mind. It's not just action for the sake of it. And you perhaps don't want to take things too far, but you kind of know that things are moving quickly. But it is a Sun opposition Jupiter. I mean, the Sun opposition Jupiter, it can be a fun aspect, can be about lots of activity, things happening left, right and centre, but it can also be like an express train out of control. And you want to stop this train and you want to ask a few questions, but somehow this train doesn't want to stop. And if it moves too quickly, there can be a disaster. I don't know. I remember I was at school. I was really bad at French, but I remember there was this story. I don't know how old I was. I was about 10, and it was this story about a train, and this train was called Hélène, and she went too fast, and the story ended with this line. I think it was, forgive my French, it went something, not what I speak French really. It was a La pauvre Hélène, elle n'existe plus, which I think means poor Hélène, she doesn't exist anymore. And there was this picture of this smashed up train with an unhappy face. And I do remember that. And so it does seem that someone is going too fast here. And if they're going too fast, then I don't know. Is it you going too fast? I suspect it might be someone else going too fast. And yeah, you're trying to apply the brakes, but it may be difficult. And so what do you do? And I think if you take things to their final conclusion, if you take things as far as they can possibly go, if you allow people to just keep going, then where are things going to end up? It might end up as some kind of big mess. I won't say an accident, a literal accident, but it could just turn into a big mess if you don't apply the brakes. But I think you can apply the brakes, because what we've got at the moment is a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn, and that Moon-Saturn conjunction is in Pisces, and that conjunction can bring things to a halt quite suddenly, and it's like you making the decision that things aren't going to move anymore. You just allow things to just, well, you don't allow things, you just say, stop, that is enough. And you resist the pressure, and you don't get caught up, and you don't get over enthusiastic, you don't allow other people to get over enthusiastic, and then things can just stop. And that's the way they should. That's the way they should be. That's how it should end up. So having a little discipline this weekend could actually be very important, because what matters fundamentally at the moment, Sagittarius, is that you feel safe. And you feel secure, and nothing's going to bother you, and questions of excitement and having a good time are at most secondary. They're certainly not worth taking risks for, and you shouldn't allow other people to take risks on your behalf. Capricorn, in many respects, this weekend is a bit of a continuation of the end of the week. I talked about Friday, and when I was talking about Friday, I was suggesting to you that maybe you had the capacity to limit other people, to control other people, that you could do this if you wanted. And I suppose I'd have to say the same thing, because, we do have, for example, a square aspect between Mercury and Saturn, and that could be about you, Saturn rules Capricorn, having an influence on other people and being able to control them, perhaps with your words, or perhaps it's just through sheer willpower. And you are going to have limited patience, I think, with people who are playing the fool, or people who are being careless, or just not talking sense, you won't have much patience with them. And that might mean that certain people might regard you as being a little bit heavy. And as I said, I think I mentioned that when I was talking about what was going on Friday. And we also have a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn. And the Moon and Saturn, you're making this conjunction in Pisces, and I think that this aspect is making you quite precise in terms of what you say. In fact, the Mercury square Saturn is giving you a certain verbal precision, and you are not going to say anything that is out of place. So it's rather different from other people. Other people may say all sorts of things that are out of place, but not you. You are going to be in control. And the question is, how far does this control extend? I think you can certainly control yourself, but do you aspire to controlling other people? I mean, you might. And you have to kind of work out whether that is the right thing to do. It might not be the right thing to do. I mean, yeah, sure, you can have an influence on people, but it's possible that it's resented. So don't push your weight around unless it's really necessary. And always think about how you are occurring to other people. And I suppose it's your words that matter in particular. And with Mercury square Saturn, it's true that you're going to be in control of the things you say, and you're going to think everything through before you say it. But that still might mean that you say things which are quite offensive. You might mean them to be offensive, and the language you're going to be using could be harsh. And even if you intend your language to be harsh, it doesn't mean to say it's necessarily a good thing to use words like that. So I suppose, Capricorn, try to be tactful and not to cause upset unless it's really necessary. Now, that Mercury-Saturn square has different manifestations, and perhaps you should seek to use that Mercury-Saturn square in a positive way. Now, that Mercury-Saturn square could be used in such a way that really doesn't involve anyone except for you. And, Mercury is in Sagittarius, and it's in a sort of fairly low-profile part of your chart, and Mercury is a planet of thought, and it's about perhaps you having serious thoughts, and those serious thoughts might not involve other people. You may not want to impose those thoughts onto other people, and instead you want to work on it on your own. And if you are able to work on your ideas on your own and perhaps get them down on paper, plan things, design things, it's perhaps the way you're going to function best. And maybe you just don't need people. Maybe you just don't need to worry about other people. And you have to ask, what is the benefit? Particularly if you're quite critical. And as I said, I think you can be quite critical, and if people are around you, inevitably, almost, you may find yourself criticizing them. It might just be the way you are, unless, of course, you know them really well. And in that case, that conjunction between the Moon and Saturn, its meaning might transform. Moon conjunct Saturn, if you and the other person really do respect each other, you're on the same level, then I think that Moon-Saturn conjunction could be incredibly positive. And it perhaps could allow for a sort of new level of communication and understanding. And if you're close enough not to be able to offend each other, then that Moon-Saturn conjunction could work really well. And if you're a single Capricorn, I suppose the Moon making a conjunction to Saturn may suggest someone new coming into your life. I mean, I have to say this, I have to be positive, don't I? I have to consider the possibility that someone is reading this horoscope that's interested in sort of romance and relationships and love and all that kind of thing. And so, Moon conjunct Saturn, if you want to be classical about it, Moon conjunct Saturn in the Capricorn chart, can be about a new relationship. But it needn't, I suppose, be about a romance. It can be about any kind of relationship, someone new coming into your life for whatever reason. And I think it can work, provided there's a degree of respect. It does seem about Moon conjunct Saturn that you're the one in control, or at least you should be the one in control, because Saturn is the planet with the gravitas. The Moon is a sort of a lighter influence, and the Moon does represent another person, because of course the Moon rules Cancer, your opposite sign. So that Moon-Saturn conjunction might be helpful. But if you do find yourself getting close to someone, or perhaps rekindling an old relationship, it's possibly a good idea not to say too much, because the Moon makes a square to Mercury, and Moon square Mercury can be about misunderstandings, verbal misunderstandings, and of course Mercury is also making a square to Saturn. So too many words could be quite destructive and could be undermining, and I suppose they might spoil the peace. Aquarius, Venus is moving into your sign today, or rather on Saturday, London time, 6:13 a.m. And that's going to be even earlier if you're in the Americas. And so, in fact, if you're in California, then late on Friday evening, Venus will move into Aquarius. But Venus moves into Aquarius, and it could be late on Saturday, but one way or another, it's getting there. And Venus will stay in Aquarius, I think, for the rest of the year. So Venus, by the end of the year, Venus is at 27 Aquarius. So for the rest of the month, Venus is in Aquarius. And so with Venus moving into Aquarius, that does have an impact on the way you come across and the way you relate to people. And Venus is the planet of relating, so it does mean that you're going to be able to relate very well, though it is moderated by the fact that it is conjunct Pluto. So we got Venus conjunct Pluto in the first degree of Aquarius, and so that means, Aquarius, that you're able to, I think, express yourself in, I would have said, quite a powerful way. It's because of that Pluto influence. And when people get close to you, they start to realize how much power you've got. And this is a reminder, of course, that Venus is now in Aquarius. Venus is in your sign, and it's going to stay in Aquarius with no interruption until I think 2043. So you better get used to it. But it does give you power, it gives you gravitas, and it does mark you out as someone special, who is different, who is quite independent. And with Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, this is the kind of impression you're giving. And you do come over, I believe, as quite an interesting person. Now, that's one aspect of a weekend, certainly helping you in terms of making the right impression. But we do also have a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn in Pisces. And that Moon conjunct Saturn is perhaps rather different. It's a different emphasis, and it may be quite materialistic, Moon-Saturn conjunction. Looking at, what matters, perhaps financially. I know it sounds a bit tedious. We don't really want to have to worry about money, but money might be something that you are thinking about, because of this conjunction, and perhaps you regard certain financial details as being important. And, also you may become aware of the financial dimension without it being explicitly mentioned. And this perhaps relates to perhaps the sensitivity of being a Pisces. Pisces can feel. You can feel what is around you. And you know what people are thinking. You know to some extent what their motivations are. And if someone's underlying motivation is money, I think you're going to know it. It's just going to be obvious to you. And in that sense, the people around you are going to be open books. And if someone is motivated by money, that may give you a different view of them. And you may want to change your approach. Moon conjunct Saturn can be quite tough, and once you recognize what someone wants, then you can deal with them accordingly. You might decide you want to give them what they want. Alternatively, that might encourage you to be quite harsh with someone if you think it's just all about money, and that's not perhaps going to be tolerable as far as you are concerned. But there's no need to fall out with anyone. It's just good to know where people's financial interests lie, and if someone is motivated by money, surely that is that's good to know. And so that's one aspect potentially of relationships. Another aspect is the fact that there is an opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. And with that aspect between Sun and Jupiter, it may be that some people are being a little extreme. They may just be being boisterous. That they have a lot of energy, or they appear to have energy and a lot of energy. It may just be hot air, but people are making a lot of noise and they're exaggerating. And I think that some people want a lot of attention, and this would be particularly the case if you were socializing. For example, if you were going to a party on Saturday night, then someone seems to be taking something too far. There's always someone taking something too far when the Sun is opposition Jupiter. And even people who are close to you are capable of taking things too far. And it's just not something you entirely appreciate. I suppose, Aquarius, perhaps you're being too serious, being a little bit too judgmental, but excess is just not going to be something that you really appreciate. And I don't know what to suggest about that. Can you calm things down? I think you can to an extent. But, maybe if you see someone behaving in an excessive way, you should take the view that, it's good because you're able to see someone for what they really are. And it's always good to know the truth. And if someone is, behaving in a selfish way or a self-indulgent way, it's good to know, because in a way that is a note for the future. So you get the idea, Aquarius. You are, it is true, quite sociable at the moment, and you can come over in a very powerful way, but at the same time you're aware of what motivates other people, and you can see excessive behavior at first hand. And so that might mean that you can make some important decisions about other people over the weekend and decide, which people are worth knowing and which people perhaps you might want to distance yourself from. Pisces. It's good that the moon is moving through your sign, and the moon is moving through your sign, and it's making a conjunction to Saturn. Furthermore, we have a square between Mercury and Saturn, and so what we have is we've got Mercury in Sagittarius, square Saturn, and we've got Moon making a conjunction to Saturn, and I would regard this as being fortunate because it allows you to be in control, particularly with that Mercury square Saturn. Sometimes Pisces, you can be a little bit chaotic and you can say things without really thinking about it, and you can perhaps get yourself into a bit of trouble by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, but not now. I think you are in control, and you'll be very careful with your words, and there won't be many words out of place. And it is the weekend, and I know that it's supposed to be a time of rest and relaxation, but Pisces, I don't think that you're necessarily going to be in the mood for rest and relaxation. As far as you're concerned, there are things to do. Time is precious, and if something is important to you, then Pisces, I think that you're going to want to do it straight away. And you are, I believe, prepared to put in the work. Now, as far as your general humour is concerned, I think you are quite serious, and you understand that things have to be taken seriously. Obviously, if you are serious, and you probably you won't suffer fools gladly. But the Sun is opposition Jupiter, and that Sun opposition Jupiter, I think it's an important aspect. It's an aspect I'll be talking about later in this video. But Sun opposition Jupiter can be excessive, and you're going to be aware of pressure. So there are things you would like to be doing, and you'd like to be doing things in your own way, at your own pace, but there is pressure to move, pressure to go places, pressure to do things that you didn't really want to do. And so the question is, how do you deal with that pressure? Well, I think to an extent it depends on who is exercising it. Some people are not necessarily particularly important, and they just put pressure on you because you're around. Other people matter, and if you don't do what they ask, there could be consequences. It might create a bad impression. And I'm thinking particularly of doing things of a administrative nature, or perhaps connected with work, or you're told that something needs to be done and there's a deadline, that kind of situation. In that case, I think you would be unwise to ignore it, even though it is the weekend. It's supposed to be a time to relax, but I don't think it's going to be a particularly relaxing weekend. And so sometimes you're going to have to do what people ask, particularly if they're asking you to do something of a fairly material nature, and it's something you know how to do. It's easy, but it's time. But if you do it with relatively good grace, I think that would create the right impression, and you don't want to just be too precious about your time. Just say, oh, it's a weekend, it's special, that kind of thing. I don't think that's necessary. But some people are time wasters. There's no doubt about that, and I think that you won't tolerate time wasters. No, that is because you've got this Mercury square Saturn, and Mercury square Saturn, it does have many manifestations. Mercury square Saturn may be about you being able to concentrate hard and being able to work hard. Mercury square Saturn can also be about you not tolerating someone's interference, or you not suffering fools gladly, just finding someone annoying and just making it clear that you actually do find them annoying and not being prepared to mince your words, because Mercury square Saturn can be an aspect that is very harsh, and your use of language in certain situations could be powerful, but maybe ever so slightly offensive. But Pisces, whatever happens, I do think that you are in control, and people do listen to you, and people do take you seriously. And also, Pisces, over the weekend, I just do think that you're going to be able to do a lot, and if you give it your best shot and you really concentrate, I think whatever you do, it can really be of very high quality. And that's it. Those are my forecasts of the 12 signs, and now I want to look at the weekend from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 21, which is biting through. So what biting through relates to is justice and punishment. And I think that the symbol here is of a piece of gold, perhaps, which is covered in hard leather, and you have to bite through, biting through to see the good in something. And there is the indication that things in their raw form, people in their raw form, perhaps leave something to be desired, but perhaps if you can get through to people, you may be able to moderate their behavior. So there is a situation where someone is just not behaving properly, perhaps being immature, and it's just making life difficult, and you've got to do something about it. And biting through is about administering justice. I mean, I don't mean this literal justice. I mean, I suppose unless you're a judge, it's just it's dealing with, could be other people, could be yourself. It may be that you're very aware of your own failings, and you can perhaps see the good in yourself, but you kind of need some self-discipline, and you want to sort of get through to that gold within yourself, and you know that you're very stubborn. We know that we're being stubborn. We've got behavior patterns that are very ingrained, but we know we've got good in ourselves. We know we can get it together, and we just have to perhaps work on ourselves. Now, that is one way in which biting through could be working out, but it could also be about another person, someone who we haven't given up on, but we just know that as it stands, their behavior and their actions aren't perfect. Perhaps they've let us down, perhaps they've been an idiot, and we just need to do something about it. And it does seem that we can get through. Now, we have a moving line here, and the fifth line moves, and the fifth line is saying, well, we don't want to go too far. We don't want to administer justice too strongly. And there's always a danger, though, that we're too lenient. We might kind of let someone get away with things, or we might behave in a way that it's not sufficiently strong, so perhaps the person feels they can keep taking advantage of us. And it's just a delicate balance. One has to try to be lenient, and one has to try to be sympathetic towards people, even if they've behaved badly in the past. But there's always a danger, if we're too sympathetic, things just carry on. So we have to get the balance right. And there is an indication, perhaps, that we have to take a bit of a risk. I mean, does that go so far as to giving someone a second chance? Well, I suppose you can give someone a second chance, but with caution. And, you don't want to be too lenient. You don't want to be too strict. You do have to get that balance right, but it is going to be somewhat difficult. And fifth line moves, so that move means that we do move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 25, which is innocence. And this kind of relates to a very different situation. So it's like, we've had to deal with someone, administer sort of justice. But it's interesting we've got this word innocence, and I suppose I hadn't really thought about that before, that in terms of sort of legal matters, innocence means not guilty, doesn't it? They're innocent. And so given the previous hexagram, it is just possible that this may be about a suspicion we have about someone, or we believe someone has done something wrong or has bad intentions, and perhaps this hexagram is telling us, well, actually they are innocent. But that is a very literal meaning, interpretation of the word innocent. Of course, with the I Ching, there was a description of the I Ching. It was a book on the occult that I read a long time ago, and he was talking about the I Ching and how you use the I Ching. It was I can't remember what the book was called. It was a very well-known book on the occult. It was, I think, a sort of self-help book on everything from sort of ritual magic and everything like that. And it talked about the I Ching, and it was suggesting that as you read the I Ching, certain words just shine, just start glow. They somehow pop out. And one word that could pop out is this word innocence. And so if you're concerned about whether or not someone is guilty, this word innocent pops out, and it says, well, maybe someone is innocent. Someone you're sure has committed a crime actually hasn't committed a crime. When I say crime, I mean whatever. Transgression, someone you think has done something bad, someone you even think is thinking something bad. So that relates back to this concept of leniency and just considering the possibility that you're jumping to conclusions about someone in terms of accusing them or someone of something, or perhaps falsely accusing them of something. But innocence in general, in terms of the I Ching, means something slightly different. It is about the innocence of not expecting anything. We don't have any guile. We don't assume that anything is going to happen. And perhaps having cleared the air in the previous hexagram, we've sort of dealt with our own guilt or other people's guilt, and we've resolved things. Now we're ready to just not expect anything. And maybe that innocence relates to other people. We know that they haven't been perfect in the past, but let's just keep an open mind, because we never know what might happen. And we mustn't create self-fulfilling prophecies. And perhaps we must trust people to do the right thing. And if we're innocent about it, we're ready to expect anything. Maybe they'll behave badly. Maybe they'll behave well. Maybe they won't have learnt the lesson. Maybe they are not taking us seriously. Maybe. We don't know. And we mustn't speculate until we actually see the result. And that's it with the I Ching. And now I want to sort of look at some of the events of the weekend, and not just of the weekend, but to sort of what was happening sort of a couple of days ago. And I think it all comes together. I mean, one of the problems with astrology, it's not just about splitting things up and analysing things. Well, Mars retrograde means this, and Sun opposition Jupiter means that, and looking at them separately. We kind of got to bring it all together. And I think what I'm really trying to say is that there are some big things happening over the weekend, and indeed they've been happening since Thursday. So on Thursday, actually I'll tell you about Thursday. What did you do on Thursday? I'll tell you what I did on Thursday. I watched a house burn down, and that's interesting because Sun was conjunct Mercury. In other words, Mercury was combust. So if Mercury is combust, what better way to spend your time than watching a house burn down? And so to be more specific, I mean, it was completely ridiculous. The local fire brigade wanted some practice. So the local fire brigade were burning a house down. So someone wanted to demolish a house. I mean, in the middle of a city. I mean, not in the middle of a city, but in a residential area. And so they invited the fire brigade to just set the house on fire. I suppose that's a good way of demolishing it, with plumes of smoke, massive. I mean, I think, I know the air quality in this city was bad over the course of the day. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it. And so there are plumes of smoke. We watched this, and there were lots of other people watching it, and people were responding in different ways. And first there was smoke and smoke and smoke, and then you saw the flames, and I didn't see the end of it. But I don't know, that just didn't seem right. And that maybe that's just symbolic of the sort of decay taking place in this city. Or maybe it's just symbolic of what's happening in America. There just seemed to be something just, I don't know, it was a bit childish, just burning a house down. It struck me as being a little bit childish. They seemed okay. I mean, everyone, I suppose, they could have. It was almost as if they could have invited the local school down, everyone at the local elementary school, to watch a house burning down. Kids like that kind of stuff, but there weren't loads of school children. It was just adults watching this house burn down. And so that's what I did on Thursday. I watched a house burn down, and I thought that was quite fitting with the fact that on Thursday the Sun was conjunct Mercury. So then on Friday, we had Mars going stationary retrograde, and that stationary retrograde, that is a big event. Mars moved came to a standstill at 6 degrees 10 minutes Leo, and you look at where Mars is Mars is right now. It's at 6 degrees 10 degrees Leo. I mean, Mars is still right there, causing problems potentially. I know a lot of people are worried about Mars going retrograde. In my last video, I talked about Mars going retrograde, and one thing I didn't mention about Mars going retrograde, it does potentially impact the inauguration chart of Joe Biden. So just a reminder that Joe Biden was inaugurated as president on January the 20th, 2021. And, it's interesting that, his pardoning of his son, Hunter Biden, has got a huge amount of criticism. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about it, but it's criticism left, right and centre. Democrats aren't happy about it. Republicans, well, it could just sort of, I suppose the Republicans kind of are happy about it because it's kind of undermining Biden. But if you look at the inauguration chart, there was a Mars-Uranus conjunction at 6:40, Mars at 6:40 Taurus, and Uranus at 6 degrees 44 Taurus, and this was square Jupiter. So if you look at what Mars is doing, so I'll just put the chart for the weekend on the outer wheel. So there is Mars at 6 degrees 10 Leo, and it's square the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So it's really stirring things up. Now that might be about the inauguration and the fallout from the inauguration. I mean, I hope it's as limited as that. It could be worse than that, because Mars-Uranus conjunction, you do associate that with war and violence and bad things happening to America, or at least bad things happening to the regime, of the Biden regime. So this Mars retrograde, stationary retrograde, I mean, I know it went retrograde on Friday, but it's dead still at the moment. It really is dead still. I mean, if I look at sort of Raphael's ephemeris for 2024, it does have the positions. It does tell you how you can see Mars's movement through December, and you can see that on the first of December it's at 5:58, and the 15th of December it's at 5:41. So it's hardly moving at all. And right now over the weekend it's 6 degrees 10, 6 degrees 10. It's just not moving. It's hardly moving at all. I mean, it's not. It's still. And so it's kind of frozen on that position. And so it's frozen square the Mars-Uranus conjunction in the inauguration chart. And so given the association between Mars and Uranus and war, there's a possibility that something is happening, perhaps relating to the security of America, or perhaps to America's armed forces. So that is something to perhaps be concerned about, especially as that Mars, as that Mars is also opposition Jupiter. It's a bit difficult to see that is an opposition because everything is so crunched up. But if you can see 6:10 Leo, opposition Jupiter at 7:23 Aquarius, and square the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So the Biden regime has Jupiter square Mars-Uranus. In fact, Saturn square the Mars-Uranus as well. And then sort of Mars triggers that. So this is a difficult time. Now, it may just be all about the pardon, but I'm just suggesting that it might possibly be something else. Now, another thing that we have over the weekend is Sun opposition Jupiter. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Sun opposition Jupiter can be a difficult aspect. And it can be an aspect which is the thing that blows things up. It's the final blow. The tension builds, and Sun opposition Jupiter, it goes. And I think it's kind of more useful to see Sun opposition Jupiter heliocentrically as Earth conjunct Jupiter. Earth, we're on the Earth, so Jupiter conjuncts the Earth, and so that's when it happens. Because remember, Sun opposition Jupiter geocentrically, if you put the Earth in the center of the solar system, is the same as Earth conjunct Jupiter. And so to give you an idea about what it means for Earth conjunctions with outer planets, I mean, let me just give you an example. This doesn't involve Jupiter, but I'm just doing this to sort of show you what I mean. So here's the that's the heliocentric chart of Chernobyl. So let me just quickly show you the geocentric chart of Chernobyl. So geocentrically, Chernobyl at the time of Chernobyl, the Sun was at 522 Taurus, and Pluto was at 559 Scorpio. So there was a Sun-Pluto opposition. Now, geocentric Pluto and heliocentric Pluto, they're going to, they're going to be in a fairly similar position, but also an opposition to a planet, an Earth opposition in geo to an outer planet is going to be the same as a conjunction. And so if we look at the Chernobyl chart heliocentrically, then you can see that we have Earth conjunct Pluto at 5 Scorpio, and look at all the other 5. We have a Mars-Saturn conjunction at 5 Sagittarius, i.e. making a semi-sextile, and we have Jupiter at 5 Pisces. So there's this all this stuff at 5. We've got a trine, Earth conjunct Pluto, trine Jupiter, and then we've got Mars conjunct Saturn, trine Jupiter. So, that just shows you that you've got to sometimes look at heliocentric charts, because they can matter. So let's look at a few other charts, but this time focusing on the aspect we have got over the weekend, Sun opposition Jupiter. So let's think. Remember the Columbia disaster on February the 1st, 2003. So this was a space shuttle disaster when I think one of the heating units had fallen off, and so its heat shield. Sorry, that's right. Its heat shield had fallen off, so it fell off on takeoff. So when the space shuttle had its re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, if I've got this right, it wasn't properly protected, and the space shuttle just broke up, and the crew were killed, and of course it was a terrible tragedy. And it happened sort of miles and miles over Texas, and so this is the geocentric chart. And, we can see there is Sun opposition Jupiter. And in fact, Jupiter is opposition a new moon. And so, again, we can see that heliocentrically. If we create the heliocentric chart for the space shuttle disaster, there is Earth opposition Jupiter. There's no moon in the heliocentric chart. There's no point, because the Earth and the moon are in the same place. But there's your Earth opposition Jupiter. You can see that Neptune is kind of opposition that. And so that's kind of sort of quite telling. I think with Neptune, I think is important to have that Neptune as well. So that doesn't mean to say that there was definitely going to be a disaster, but it just perhaps was unwise to have a space shuttle flight at a time when the Earth was conjunct Jupiter heliocentrically. So that's the Columbia disaster. Another difficult event was Black Monday. I don't know if you remember this. It depends how old you are, I suppose. So October the 19th, 1987 was, I believe, the biggest one-day fall in the stock market. The stock market, I believe, fell about sort of 20% in a day on Monday, October the 19th, hence Black Monday. And what had happened was, in terms of astrologically, there was other things going on. Mercury had gone retrograde over that weekend, and I certainly remember that weekend in the UK. There was a massive hurricane. Was it hurricane? It was a major storm in the UK on that weekend. And then on Monday, the stock market global markets just completely collapsed, and there was there's Sun opposition Jupiter over the weekend. Sorry, on when markets opened, I believe at 9:30 a.m. New York. I think that's when they were still opening on in 1987. So Sun opposition Jupiter. So that is the geocentric chart, and if we look at that heliocentrically, which we can now, so there's our Sun opposition Jupiter, and you can see Mars is very closely quincunx that. So perhaps you don't always just focus on Sun opposition Jupiter. Remember, there's a Sun opposition Jupiter happens every year. In other words, the heliocentric Earth conjunct Jupiter happens every year. So perhaps you've got to look at other planets doing stuff at the same time. And so Mars is quincunx Jupiter and Mars is quincunx Earth. So this was the sort of final trigger. And of course, you've also got Uranus here. So Uranus is making the trine to Earth. So this is another example of Earth conjunct Jupiter causing problems. And something more recently was the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So in the autumn of 2022, this pipeline between Russia and Germany was blown up. Now, there's been the latest stories that Ukrainians were involved, but I think it was the Americans that did it. I mean, I think... Were the Ukrainians really able to blow up this pipeline that was hundreds of feet under the surface? I mean, it was a major environmental catastrophe as well. It seems to me likely that the Americans were involved with this attack on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And so here is the chart, the geocentric chart for Nord Stream 2 pipeline going. I make it September 28, 2022 at 2:03 a.m. This isn't exactly the right place, but it was close to Ronna in Denmark. So this is approximately the right time. And so there you have Sun opposition Jupiter. And if we look at the heliocentric chart for it, we again see there's our Earth conjunct Jupiter, and so it was that which was the release, the final release, and of course that's really what happened. Someone blew it up, and a lot of gas got released. And then there's Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor is December the 7th, 1941, which was 83 years ago today. So this is the horoscope of Pearl Harbor for the Japanese attack on the American naval base on Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. And there's the Sun at 15:15 Sagittarius, and Jupiter is at 16:31 Gemini. So that's geocentric. And if we look at the heliocentric chart, then we will of course see Earth conjunct Jupiter. So there is Earth conjunct Jupiter. So I mean, I know it's saying it's the same thing in a way. It's in this case because there aren't any other aspects involving Earth and Jupiter. It's a bit redundant looking at the heliocentric chart as well. But I'm just doing that to just illustrate the point that it's always a good idea to look when you're looking at this kind of astrology, to look at the heliocentric chart as well as the geocentric one. And so that's Pearl Harbor. Now that brings me on to what is happening over the weekend, this weekend. So let me turn that back to the regular chart. So so this weekend we indeed have an opposition between Sun and Jupiter, December the 7th, 2024. And if you compare this weekend with if you compare Pearl Harbor, if you compare this with Pearl Harbor, we can get an idea of the lineup. So outer wheel, we've got Pearl Harbor. So there are certain similarities between the position of the planets this weekend and what was going on in Pearl Harbor. So for a start, we've got Venus at the time of Pearl Harbor was at 136 Aquarius, and Venus is at 0 degrees 43 Aquarius, and so there's a Venus return. And looking at Jupiter, looking at the Sun Jupiter conjunction, well, it's the same day, December the 7th. So not surprisingly, the Sun is just within a degree of where it was at the time of Pearl Harbor. And then Jupiter is in the same place. So it's in terms of Pearl Harbor, it's a solar return, it's the Jupiter return, and the Venus return. They've all come together. So there is this weird link between sort of today, December the 7th, 2024, and Pearl Harbor 83 years ago. And to cap it all, and by the way, of course, that means that by definition the Earth is again conjunct Jupiter. So, but to cap it all, Neptune is going stationary direct. So that's actually tomorrow at 11:42 p.m. Neptune comes to a standstill. And so, Neptune, the planet of the sea, planet of shipping, is coming to a standstill. That really, I don't know, it's one of those things where with astrology, what one does as an astrologer, one looks at different dates and one tries to find connections between those dates with astrology. So on this date, we had a particular event and we had the same event on another date. So what I'm doing is I'm pointing out that there are these weird similarities between this weekend and the weekend 83 years ago under Pearl Harbor. Now, does that mean that we're going to see another Pearl Harbor? Well, I mean, the Japanese are not going to attack Pearl Harbor this weekend. I mean, that's not going to happen. But could we alternatively say that American shipping is at risk over the weekend? Or could there be some kind of disaster that really comes out of the blue of an Earth-Jupiter nature? We saw about some of these big events that have happened with Sun opposition Jupiter or Earth conjunct Jupiter, whichever way you want to look at it. I mean, we had Black Monday, the stock market. We had a stock market crash then, there on October 19th, 1987. Or is it something like Nord Stream 2 with a pipeline blowing up or being blown up quite deliberately? So that's certainly, I suppose, something that we might expect. I mean, it is a possibility, but it just could be nothing. Astrologers do that. We are meaning machines. We try to find connections, and we find them, but maybe it's all irrelevant, and nothing much is going to happen. Now, I think it's a good idea to look at the United States' chart. We're thinking about the United States, just a reminder of what is happening in the US chart. So here is the USA's chart, and I'll superimpose the weekend chart onto it just to see I'll just take the midnight weekend, the midnight weekend chart. I didn't really want to look at that chart. I just wanted to look at the regular chart, I think. Oops, sorry about that. There we are, sorry. Okay, so the USA's chart. Now, that Sun opposition Jupiter is across the United States' descendant. Okay, it's not exactly on the United States' ascendant, assuming that the United States was born at 5:10 p.m. But you can see that Jupiter is relatively close to America's Mars-Uranus midpoint. It's actually on America's Mars ascendant midpoint. So I would have said that Sun-Jupiter opposition that we've got over the weekend is hitting America's chart, and there is to be some suggestion of enemies, America's enemies, attacks from outside. So that is a possibility. And then Mars, as I've said several times, Mars is conjunct the United States' node. So the node, I would see the node as being about connections, because if you take the German view of a node, it's about your connections with other people. You put Mars conjunct the North Node, and so that's what you get. And that Mars is actually making a 45-degree aspect to America's natal Mars. So you've got Mars square, Mars semi-square Mars. So you've got the principle there of some kind of a piece of violence, an attack. And so America has Mars semi-square, the North Node, in its natal chart. And yeah, so Mars is certainly triggering that. And then we've got Neptune. Neptune is on the transiting Neptune is it's in Pisces. Transiting Neptune is not necessarily it's actually transiting Neptune is opposition the Neptune midheaven midpoint. So I think you can see with all of these events happening over the weekend, they just do seem relevant to the United States. It's just this weird coincidence that it is also the 83rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor. But I must make it clear that I'm just pointing things out. I'm just pointing out the connections. And perhaps as you listen to this, you can just you can think about it. And I'm not saying that for sure some absolute horrendous disaster is going to befall the US. All I'm just doing is I'm just looking at how one moment in time on December the 7th, 1941 does seem to be connected with this moment of time in which we're in. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today, or rather for this weekend. I hope you enjoy this video, or you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indicate this by liking it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.